narrated by Andrew Barago. We have Rachel Fellman, Jonathan Levin, and Scott Nickel, everybody.
Great. Thanks for coming out, everybody, and braving the suddenly winter weather that we have that's descended over San Francisco, and the smog and the ash and the everything else. Really appreciate that you came out. Yeah, this is part of a regular thing that we do here at the Cartoon Art Museum. Tuesday night Toon Talks. If you want to make sure you don't miss out, we've got an email sign-up list up front. We've got Facebook and Twitter, and I'll sound 100 years old. 100 years old when I say all of the things like the Instagram and the other online things. But if you want to follow us and see what we're doing, go to cartoonart.org or sign up for our email list. And let's start by just having our panelists introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
Well, I'm Scott Nickel. I'm a cartoonist and a cartoon educator. I'm here because Andrew asked me to be here. But I'm also a big fan of Charles Schulz and anything Peanuts. If you have any questions about either of those, ask me. I probably know something about it. When I was a teenager, I first met Charles Schulz and created a friendship with him. And I got to eventually sponsored my membership into the National Cartoon Society, he and Maura Turner. And we can talk more about that later.
I haven't met Charles Schulz. My name is Jonathan Lemon. I'm a cartoonist also. I draw the comic strip Rabbits Against Magic, and also I just started drawing Alley Oop, which has been running since 1932. And I've also been involved with the Schulz Museum a couple of times as the cartoonist in residence. And also I was featured in a book. Were you in that book? The Peanuts tribute book? A lot of folks.
Oh, yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, I was in that.
And hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Fellman. I was, until very recently, like seconds ago, the assistant archivist at the Schulz Museum. I was also the only archivist there, so I was pretty much in charge, reporting to a ghost. And I'm very excited to be back here in the Peanuts world, because when you're an archivist, you become a human encyclopedia, and I have absolutely no use for all of these Charles Schulz facts at my new job at the California Historical Society. No one has asked me one Peanuts question, so it's great to be back in this room.
Well, great, we're here to take care of that. So yeah, a little bit of my background. My introduction to Peanuts, like probably most of you, came at a very early age. Reading it in the newspaper, my older siblings had the Peanuts paperbacks sitting around their house. So, and obviously the annual screenings of Charlie Brown Christmas and It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. And actually, when I was in elementary school, there was even a Saturday morning Peanuts cartoon. So it was again pretty much inescapable. And when I moved out to San Francisco in 2000, the very first exhibition that I saw at the Cartoon Art Museum was a Peanuts 50th anniversary celebration. And that was, that was very shortly after Charles Schulz passed away. But I'm glad to say over the years I've gotten to know a lot of great people who knew Charles Schulz and were friends with him. Including his wife, Jeannie Schulz, who is one of the Cartoon Art Museum's biggest and most tireless supporters and advocates, and has been from the very beginning. So I was very honored when I was asked to write a book about Peanuts, documenting every single character who appeared in the strip. So over the course of 50 years, obviously, we got to know a lot of favorite characters like Charlie Brown and Snoopy and Linus and Lucy. But that's a presentation for another night. We're here to talk about, not these guys, not the classic Peanuts gang, but we're going to kick things off with, I think, the patron saint of heroic Peanuts characters, and this is our pal Shermie. And Shermie actually is, he's a very important figure. He delivers the very first line and the very first punchline in Peanuts, October 2nd, 1950. And it really sets the tone for the entire strip. I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on.
Well, I've met Shermie. He, at the opening of the museum, when they opened at the Charles Schulz Museum, Shermie was there. And he came up and introduced himself, and he said, "Hi, I'm Shermie." And he told me about he worked at the Art Institute with Charles Schulz, and that's how Sparky. For those if you don't know, that's what people call Charles Schulz, Sparky, and that's where they met, and that's how he got the name of Shermie. It's similar to how he got the name of Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown was a real person too. But, and Shermie, the Shermie that I met was a really nice guy.
Please don't hate me for the rest of the panel, but they didn't know each other from work. They were childhood friends.
That's right. You were
Yes,
right.
I'm sorry.
You're right. That's right. You're right. Was that Charlie Brown who worked at the
Yes,
Art Studio?
yes, that's where you're
Okay.
getting
That was
that.
the correspondence course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he taught at like the Draw Me school, the ads where you would have to draw the cartoon character and you would send it in for a talent test. He was one of the people answering those letters.
Yeah. Well, don't apologize for correcting me. That's good. That's good. My students do it all the time.
Yeah, so this is it ends up being a recurring theme in Schultz's work. That something a name catches his fancy, or he would read a newspaper article, or just take an interest in something. And when you're drawing a daily comic strip, that deadline never stops. There's always another day coming up. So you just never know where inspiration's going to strike. And Shermie was, he remained a background character. He was Charlie Brown's best friend for most of the early years of the strip, and Charlie Brown by nature doesn't really work with a best friend. So I think that ultimately led to Shermie just being a background character when Schulz needed someone else on the baseball field. Just gradually disappeared. This is a character who did not gradually disappear.
She disappeared abruptly and with great violence.
Yes, this is, so we all know the name Charlie Brown, one of the most famous names in comics. This is Charlotte Braun. And she had a brief, I don't know that I'd call it tragic life, but actually we'll continue here. So Charlie Brown, thoughtful, a little bit shy, a little bit soft-spoken, wishy-washy. Obviously, is the best way to describe him. So Charles Schulz comes up with, who's the exact opposite of Charlie Brown? Good old Charlotte Braun. You can see from the bold lettering, very loud, brash, abrasive character. Showed up around 1954. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on her, but...
Did she die? What's that?
Well,
Oh.
actually,
You're probably going to show in the next.
Here we go. In the next, Rachel can weigh in on this.
Oh, someone wrote him a fan letter, I think a child, complaining that Charlotte was not funny, and so he wrote back, it's like, I am going to remove her from the strip, I agree with you, but you should know that you have the death of an innocent child on your conscience, or something of that sort, and of course, the axe. So, I wasn't kidding.
Yeah. Again, you might think, I've read through every Peanut strip, I didn't see any on-screen murders or anything, and you're right. We do have this cute drawing, which, is this part of the Schulz Museum archives, or is this part of the National Archives?
I should know this, but I do not.
Okay.
I don't want to speculate. I would
Okay.
assume, but
But this letter, thankfully, from 1955 was saved. Charlotte Brown, however, was not. And what I love about a character like Charlotte Brown is if you read through all 50 years of Peanuts, and I think we have, and I hope you get that opportunity, but you'll see sometimes Schultz hits upon an idea that is strong, that he likes, that's interesting, like loud, pushy character that acts as a foil to Charlie Brown. And you can see, oh, well, that works better for Lucy. You rein in some of that, you make her a better developed character, you make her not just a loud character. So you do get these prototypes and you get these interesting things where he is testing the waters and finding out what works and what doesn't. And so we all recognize this character. Miss Ockmar, so one of the many recurring adult presences in the comic strip, and she was, and this happens with many grade school teachers. She was Linus's first crush, and so here's Linus mooning over Miss Ockmar. I don't know if there was an Ockmar in Schultz's life.
In his life?
Yeah, or if he
I don't know.
just hit upon that name.
yeah.
It's a funny name.
Yeah, so this is Linus. He got very involved in Miss Ockmar's life. He joined in and picked up a picket sign for her when she collapsed during a teacher strike. And even though she married, Linus continued to call her Miss Ockmar. So, there's a classic run of strips where he practically drove her to a nervous breakdown because he promised every day to bring in some eggshells for a school project that just it wasn't meant to be. Never happened. All right. Yeah, if anyone wants to jump in at any point on any of these characters, then
I thought that I recall, it's just I know you're looking at me, that she married and became Mrs. Hagermeyer, which was, of course, the name of one of his war buddies. But Othmar, I don't know where he got Othmar. It almost sounds like something backwards. But
yeah, and I think he was a fan of that letter combination because he had, instead of Linus seeing an optometrist, he saw an ophthalmologist.
oh yeah,
So this was something. Yeah, he was very fond of funny words. If there's a more interesting, strange, eye-catching word that he could use.
Well, that's how Beethoven became Schroeder's. So why don't you call it Bach or something? Because he thought Beethoven was a funnier name. And that's the reason.
It's got that TH combination there too.
that's true.
It's like the double L's in Superman. Once you notice them, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, Lana Lang, you can't. This is one of my favorite characters from camp. Doesn't officially have a name, but a lot of fans tend to refer to him by his only line of dialogue: "Shut up and leave me alone." And this is the only view of this character that you ever get. So Charlie Brown is trying to be a good sport about being stuck at camp. This kid obviously is not, and he appears for about a week, and this is all he ever says: "Shut up and leave me alone."
Yeah, when I saw the strip, with the way the head is and the ears, I always pictured it was Alfred E. Newman.
That's what you'd see if you turned around.
Yeah.
And Alfred E. Newman, one of the rare characters that Schultz didn't create, who showed up in
He's in the strip.
Yeah.
Well, as the son, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Strangest thing ever happened in Peanuts. I mean, I can tell you that completely definitively. When the sun rises, then it's Alfred E. Newman.
I'm curious, Jonathan, when you first discovered the comic strip, do you remember which characters or storylines
Well,
were there?
you can probably tell from my accent, I did not grow up in the United States. So interestingly enough, I would say the biggest influence on me as a kid about American culture. I mean, I learned everything. I learned about Joe Slobotnik. I learned about all these crazy things that didn't happen in where I lived in England. So, and we didn't have the comic strip. We had the little books that you could buy in paperback, Signet books. I think the first one I remember was Mr. Sack, which was, I don't know if it was
He's coming up.
He's coming up,
Yes.
okay.
We'll talk about him in just a minute here. Okay, so yeah, again, we see "Shut Up and Leave Me Alone." Again, and I think the Schultz studio people had me come up with a different, less offensive name for him in the book. He's in there, but I did not get to call him "Shut Up and Leave Me Alone." And he what I loved about this was several weeks after Charlie Brown got back from camp. He mentions to Linus, "Hey, I got a letter from my bunkmate." And Linus says, "What does he say?" Obviously, "Shut up and leave me alone." And that's one of the great things about Schultz is he knew how to stretch out a gag for just the right amount of time, and when you could revisit that, he knew, just the right time to drop a joke like that. So we did mention Mr. Sack, and anyone want to guess his secret identity?
You do get no points. You get, what is it that you used to get at Marvel? You get a no prize.
No prize.
Figure this out.
Okay, so maybe Jonathan can talk a little bit about this classic story.
Well, he goes up to camp one year and he gets a rash. Makes his head look like a baseball. And in order to hide his embarrassment, he wears this sack on his head. And by wearing this sack, I guess he becomes really popular because he's uninhibited by his real personality. It's like he's wearing a mask. And becomes like the greatest guy ever. And then, of course, the rash clears up and the mask comes off and he's back to being Charlie Brown.
Yeah, and we did a version of this panel at San Diego Comic-Con, and Jeff Pigeon, who's one of my friends from Pixar, he's the voice of the green aliens in Toy Story, among other claims to fame. And he had this whole, we were just telling funny jokes about Peanuts and enjoying the comic strip, and he had this whole story about Schultz and reinventing himself and trying to, break from the shackles of his past. But you never can quite do that. And it was very thoughtful and deep. And he thought. So he really read a lot into the whole Mr. Sack storyline. Like, is this Charles Schultz commenting on himself? Like, as a does he feel like he's earned all these accolades and all this love from the entire world, or does he secretly feel that they're going to pull off the sack? And here is Alfred E. Newman.
Oh, you got it.
At the culmination of this storyline, which is a favorite of many people. And so Charlie Brown's baseball rash is finally cleared up. Again, one of the, I don't know if anyone wants to guess the other cartoon characters that Schultz didn't create who showed up in the comic strip.
I know Bill Malden's characters were, but he didn't draw them, I think.
Right.
He just copied them in.
Right.
Willie and Joe.
Willie and Joe from Bill Malden's wartime comics showed up in a Veterans Day strip.
Do you know,
toward the end of the run.
did Bill draw those and send them to Sparky, or did he just copy them from them?
That's where my knowledge runs out. I know that they were friends that corresponded fairly routinely. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that was a photo stat, because by that Malden was much older, and I don't think he was really drawing.
Right. But when I first saw it, that was my big guess. Did he draw it for him? And he put it in there. I don't know.
Is there a backstory to this? Did he have to contact William M. Gaines to get permission
I'm pretty sure that he did, actually. And I'm racking my brain a little bit just to see if there was anything else to that story. But I know that I've read at some point an interview where he's explaining this, and he just can't think of anything else that's sufficiently absurd to top off this storyline, which starts with Charlie Brown seeing a baseball in the sky every morning, and then the rash happens. So he's hallucinating a baseball everywhere. So it escalated until it reached the logical conclusion of humor, Alfred E. Newman. So.
And then the next day it was a whole new storyline. So it was just an amazing bit of storytelling there.
But it's always good when you look at these strips, if you knew what day of the week it was, I'm going to guess and think that was a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're responsible for Monday through Saturday. And those usually storylines started on Monday, and they would end on a Saturday. And then the Sunday page could be similar or totally something different.
Yeah, Sunday strips, and Jonathan can attest to this, Sunday strips aren't always, you can't be sure that your audience is going to read all 7 days of the week.
Right.
Or the paper even carries it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the features are sold separately. So often some newspapers will only carry the Sunday strip, so you can't have the continuity go through. Although Terry and the Pirates did. It's one of the few that did have it continue through. I don't know if it made sense if you didn't read the Sundays.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. We'll try that experiment later on. All right.
Did that dynamic start at the beginning of comics? The Sunday strip being totally different? Because it's like that for most comics, I think.
Pretty early on, I know, early strips like you had features like Little Nemo and Slumberland that were Sunday only. But some of the big early strips that ran 7 days a week, like Thimble Theater featuring Popeye, Sundays had a whole different storyline.
And normally what happens, if a syndicate distributes your strip, they usually see how popular it is, and then they award you the ability to do a Sunday page. You don't always get a Sunday page. But then in the market, some newspapers may only buy the Sunday page and only run that. And if you ever get a chance to see a full Peanuts, the top part of it, the Sunday pages are in 3 sections. The top part is known as the throwaway section because you have to be able to understand the entire gag by looking at the second, because not every newspaper will run the top section.
Yeah.
Which is why you buy book collections.
That's right. So what happened with that? I was up at Snoopy Place one day talking to Sparky, and I said, my newspaper, they don't publish the top part, the throwaway section, and I want to see the whole thing. So he goes, okay, well, I'll take care of that. So what he did, he signed me up, and I got just what the newspapers got. So, I would get once a week the entire Peanuts weekly thing. I got the dailies too, that was a bonus. But I got the Sundays, and I still had those collections, and so I could see what was left out. But what was really cool is I got it, it wouldn't run till like 6 weeks later. So I knew what was going to happen. So I would tell my friends, I bet you Snoopy's going to do this tomorrow. How do you know that?
How do papers figure out is a comic successful or not? You got
They take a poll, and Sparky told me once, I don't know if it's really true today, but he says the number one job of a cartoonist is to sell newspapers. And at that time, that was really your meat and potatoes. I mean, you had to sell newspapers, and papers would take your strip on how popular it was, and then we'd do polls in the newspaper. So, what comic strips do you like? And so, if it was really successful, so okay, now we want you to do a Sunday page.
I know that sometimes, I don't know. Maybe somebody probably knows, whether this was a practice that continued. But I know early in Schultz's career, sometimes they would just pull a strip and see who complained as well, a little bit less scientific. But I know Peanuts got pulled from a couple of papers arbitrarily for that reason, and I think it really shook him up because he didn't know about it. But obviously, people do not like it when you take Snoopy away. So I'm sure they were reinstated.
Yeah.
This is, we talked about Peppermint Patty. This was one of her teammates, Tebow.
The only Peanuts character I've met. Because he is based on, well, he's not. He's explicitly not based because Tebow is a horrible person and Roland Tebow is a nice guy. But I'm one of Schultz's hockey buddies.
Yeah, that recently the Peppermint Patty's baseball team's called the Pelicans. Is that right?
Wow. I'm sorry, I actually don't
Okay.
remember that at all. I trust you completely.
It's true, I read it in the script.
Yeah, no.
All right, so Charlie Brown got the call from Peppermint Patty. Again, they were not on the same baseball team. Peppermint Patty had a much better baseball team because she was not saddled with Lucy, who was probably the most indifferent, worst outfielder of all time, and Snoopy, who again his interests kind of waxed and waned. Minus, who refused to play second base without his blanket. Charlie Brown, arguably the best player on the team, but not the most successful pitcher. Anyway, he got the call from Peppermint Patty. We need you. Get over here right away. Bring your glove. And he finds out that Tebow, her shortstop, needs to borrow Charlie Brown's glove. And again, it's a TH sound again. Charlie Brown is just first stunned that he has not actually been asked to play, and he's just hung up on the name Tebow. In the game, Charlie Brown goes to get his glove back, and Tebow scowls at him. Peppermint Patty and Charlie Brown live in different neighborhoods, and there was speculation on our panel at Comic-Con that Peppermint Patty's neighborhood is a little bit rougher. And Tebow definitely has a chip on his shoulder. And he tells Charlie Brown, I know you're kind, you come around here thinking you're better than us. And Charlie Brown takes this as a compliment. And that's how fragile his ego is. And he lets Tebow keep his glove. He says, that's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me, that I think I'm better than you. Okay, and again, sometimes you got a really oddball character design.
Handicap.
Yeah, this looks a lot like Rich
Yeah.
Smythe's character Handicap,
Yeah.
the Caddy Master. Lex Fajardo, who works for the Peanuts licensing department. He theorized to me that this might actually be an adult or like a very short man who shows up in the strip. I don't think so, because that would make him the only adult who showed up. But again, it's just kind of idle
And spoke.
Peanuts chatter.
Silent adults do show up.
Yeah. And this is one of those ships in the night characters. He just shows up very briefly, just really long enough to cause Peppermint Patty and Marcy some trouble, trying to shake them down after they spent a hard day at the country club working as caddies. He wants his cut, and of course Peppermint Patty and Marcy are not going to stand for that. And yeah, occasionally you get the reminder that these are kids in an adult world when they encounter things like this, like golf clubs that are twice their size. And, did you ever play any sports with Sparky or
Tennis.
tennis? Okay.
I was, before the National Cartoon Society, there was a group here in the Bay Area called the Northern California Cartoonists and Humorists Association. And I joined that when I was in college. And once a year, they went up to Santa Rosa to a weekend with Charles Schultz and Jeannie. And they would play tennis up there. And so I went up there once, and I got to play tennis with Sparky and Jeannie.
Great. And yeah, we're on our sports section of the slideshow right now. This is a character I just love. This is Jose Peterson, and you'll note that those names don't aren't names that you would automatically put together. And so Schultz hit upon the idea that a character of mixed Mexican-Swedish ancestry would be a fun addition to the strip.
Did he or did he not come up with that idea in a dream? I don't think that's just a fevered hallucination of memory. I think that actually happened.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Wasn't Peterson the name of his first wife?
Hellerson, but yeah.
Oh, no, right.
Yeah.
It's Hellerson.
And yeah, so I was, again, doing my research for the book, I very clearly remembered Jose Peterson, and I thought, okay, he must have been a regular presence. He must have shown up a lot, but he was only in 1 week's worth of storylines. But this is just such a fun visual that every time he swings the bat, you see his batting average go up.
Yeah.
And Peppermint Patty's commenting, 640. That's the sound of him. Like that's how he hit in New Mexico. And then crack 850. That's how he was hitting the year that he lived in North Dakota. So Charlie Brown is there because his baseball team's fortunes are about to turn around. Peppermint Patty says, this is before Peppermint Patty's really established her own team, and she says, Jose and I are going to join your team. We're obviously the two best players in this neighborhood. But then she spends a little bit of time getting to know Charlie Brown's team, and she says that it's a lost cause. So she starts her own team with Jose, and that's the team we later see with Tebow. And again, commenting on his mixed ancestry. After she tells Charlie Brown it's just not going to work, she says she's going to go to Jose's house for tortillas and Swedish meatballs. Yeah. Which
Message is received from +15888.
sounds like a great dinner. Okay, and we talked about tennis. So yeah, sports were recurring theme in Peanuts. This is a very competitive character,
Molly Bali.
And yeah, she showed up in 1977 as Snoopy's mixed doubles partner. So mixed doubles in more ways than one. And I didn't get the impression that they were also playing against a dog and a girl, or a dog and a boy in mixed doubles. But yeah, this was a way for Schultz to comment on the increasingly competitive nature of sports in general and children's sports in particular. So Molly was a win at all costs kind of a character.
Now, do you know who Molly Bali was? Billie Jean King.
Yeah.
The year is 77. This is 77. That's around like Billie Jean King.
Yeah.
Although they were close friends, so if it's a joke about her, it's a very affectionate one. Although maybe they weren't friends yet.
And so Molly actually got toned down a little bit by the introduction of some characters who were really bad sports. This character is Crybaby Booby. And this is the only view of her you ever see in this comic strip. So every time she shows up, head back, mouth open, complaining about something. And that might bring to mind certain tennis players. Maybe one particular tennis player who was really aggressive and obnoxious in the late 70s, early 80s. But we really get to see a character who looks like that with the introduction of Crybaby's brother, Bad Call Benny, who was looks to be pretty clearly modeled on John McEnroe. You got the headband, you got the bad attitude, you've got as soon as he shows up, he's insulting Molly Bali. And kids pulled no punches in Peanuts. So you would get these pretty brutal insults that you would never dare as kids maybe you would, but in the adult world you couldn't imagine going up and saying half of these things.
You have a question?
Yeah, is there a reason Molly Bolly and Truffles kind of have the same dress?
Oh,
Yeah, I've noticed that before too. It's like I just assume that they come from the same department store. You know, they've got two different locations.
Yeah, I like that theory.
I think there's only so many combinations of patterns you could do on a shirt. Because he loves using the black, the thick black, sparingly across the strips.
And also keep in mind the daily strips were not in color, so coming up with some way to break up the panel and have it interesting.
now one of the reasons that you see tennis was a main part of the strip at one time is that both Sparky and Jeannie were tennis players. They got into tennis together. And if you ever get to go to the studio, there's an outdoor tennis court. And then right by the museum, there's this big barn there. That's an indoor tennis court. And at one time, Jeannie was the doubles champion of Nevada. And so they were really into, at least Jeannie was really into tennis at one time.
Yeah, and he was a big sports fan in general, right?
Well, yeah, one day I was up there and one summer, and Sparky comes out and he's got a cast on his foot. And I was joking. I said, "What, you hurt yourself playing hockey?" And he goes, "Nobody gets hurt playing hockey." What happened was he was playing tennis and he just twisted his ankle, and now he's in a cast. But what was really cool, 6 weeks later, Snoopy ends up with a cast on his foot in the comic strip. And when Snoopy had tripped over his supper dish. And so I knew the inside story.
All right, and Peanuts was and still is, just one of the kings of licensing. So one of the most licensed, one of the most merchandised comic strips. Until Garfield came along and did literally every product under the sun. Peanuts.
Those are big for Garfield, Peanuts, and everything.
So Schultz actually addressed this in his strip with this character, Tapioca Pudding. And if you look at when she was introduced, that name was most likely in response to Strawberry Shortcake, who was a huge character in licensing and marketing who showed up in the early 80s. And Tapioca Pudding shows up, meets Linus, and explains that her dad is in licensing. And, he named her Tapioca Pudding with the vision of getting her on lunchboxes, T-shirts, making it big in Hollywood. And the last we see of her is when the world famous agent. And Snoopy was a lot of world famous characters, but as the world famous agent, he signed up to represent her. And not to speak ill of Snoopy's talents, but I think this is the last we ever heard of Tapioca Pudding.
Well, there's another background to that story. There's a cartoonist, Percy Crosby, who Sparky really liked. Percy Crosby created Skippy, and that was a big comic strip, like the 30s, right? Mm-hmm. And later came Skippy Peanut Butter. Well, Percy Crosby's daughter felt there was an infringement on a copyright. The peanut butter company said, "No, it's Skippy because it skips across your bread." So she ends up suing the peanut butter company, and she asked Sparky and Milton Caniff that they would testify on her behalf. And they said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And part of the arrangement was, if you testify, I'll give you the original Skippy strip. They did. They tried to help her in the suit. She lost. And Sparky never got his Skippy strip. But that's all part of the licensing thing about who owns a name.
And there's been a lot of debate. There's been a lot of discussion amongst cartoonists and amongst scholars about why Peanuts was so heavily merchandised and why, did this compromise the ideals of the strip in any way? But I think, and Schultz may have commented on this himself, but you're selling a newspaper strip, so you're already, by virtue of putting it out there, you're already in the act of selling something to the customer.
Well, his response to Bill Watterson, because Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, you won't market the characters. If you ever see a T-shirt or something with Calvin and Hobbes' bootleg, and Sparky's response to that was, well, he doesn't have any kids he has to support.
Is there any Rabbits Against Magic merchandise in the works?
Not really.
Okay. Rights are available, so if anybody's watching this on Facebook
One of
Live,
these days, Zazzle pretty much.
Yeah.
Take the market.
Sometimes even if you're an obscure character, you're in the right place at the right time. And I know Rachel has a fondness for this character.
I absolutely do. Yeah.
And it's not a phone number. It's a name. This is
Well, it's the canonical proof that Peanuts is set in Sebastopol,
yes.
even though it snows there, which it does not in Sebastopol.
That's a zip code, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 5 and his sisters 3 and 4. A father who gets a lot of headaches decided to rename the family after their zip code because he felt that we were all becoming numbers anyway. It's a very The Prisoner type of joke, actually. The closest they ever came to a Peanuts The Prisoner crossover, except in my own dreams.
So I've always wondered. So the image you had before was from the Thanksgiving the first animated
The Christmas special.
Christmas, yeah.
So did Bill Melendez put that in as a sort of Easter egg, sort of fun reference? Because he's the only character you don't really recognize from that group of.
Well, his
that's
sisters,
what
sisters 3 and 4 are also in that big dance scene,
Oh,
and they
the
needed.
Yeah.
This is before Peppermint Patty came along, and they needed characters to fill out the dance scene where everybody's having fun right before Charlie Brown makes them buckle down and get ready for the Christmas play. And 5 had come along at just the right time, that when Melendez needed characters to round out that scene, 3, 4, and 5 are immortalized in that scene because of right place at the right time. We mentioned Popeye earlier, and the character Bluto did not figure into very many storylines in E.C. Segar's strip, but right around the time that Fleischer Studios was creating Popeye cartoons for the theater, they needed a villain, so they grabbed Bluto, who was then a recent character, and he got to be a much more famous and celebrated character in the cartoons than he was in the comic strip. Right. And I mentioned Jeff Pitchen earlier, our discussion about this character, and he said this actually represented for him this dark side of the Peanuts universe, which is the implication that Five's father had some kind of a mental breakdown, and we don't really get. He was concerned because he said we don't really get closure or anything on that story. We don't know if Five's father is still around, if how much of a breakdown you had to have to name your family after Sebastopol's zip code. So he mentions the family name 95472, and that's what caused his father to have the breakdown. And his full name is 555-95472. And he frequently has to correct his teachers on where the accent is.
It's 9.
Yeah. So here we see 3 and 4. And again, they were part of that. They were part of that big dance scene in the Peanuts Christmas special.
Are they 20?
Right there. So 3 and 4 flopping around. Their brother 5 is in between them. Shermie, this is one of his last. One of his first and last appearances in the Peanuts specials. there's an interesting snapshot. Pigpen had some staying power, although Schultz admitted he eventually started using Pigpen less and less because he said there are only so many stories you can get out of a boy who doesn't want to take a bath.
Right.
Okay, so we all know Snoopy, but his family did not appear quite as often as Snoopy himself. First and only appearance of Snoopy's father on Father's Day strip. And Snoopy and his 7 siblings all signed a Father's Day card for him. Snoopy's dad, of course, looks like Snoopy, but with a big white mustache. And not all of Snoopy's siblings appeared in the comic strip. So there's some that are unaccounted for. The animated specials and TV shows identified all 8, but my book was specifically focused on the strip, so they did not get a mention. Snoopy's mother appears in the story that Snoopy is telling about World War I. And here's his mother coming over on a ship to visit Spike, who's been wounded. So there's Snoopy's mother in the middle with the fur hat. And Snoopy admits as he's telling this story that this may or may not have really happened, but he said this is how he chooses to remember it. So yeah, you do have a lot of, you run the whole range of emotions in Peanuts. So you get these touching stories about war and the point of view of soldiers and.
Well, yeah, because he served in World War II, and for those of you who don't know, he went off to go to the military, and soon after that, his mother died, and she had been sick, and that always. So anything about loneliness and the war, if you read the strip long, you could find stuff like this. What's interesting about the strip, if you read about Schultz's life and you compare up where he was in life and what strip he drew, you can see a correlation between things he's going through, like with his kids, playing hockey, twisting his ankle. He always said, write what you know. Whatever you do, write what you know about. And so things that would happen in his life, he would share it in the strip in a way you wouldn't even know that something related was going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth in Peanuts. And these are 2 of Snoopy's brothers, Olaf and Andy. Andy is basically a shaggy Snoopy. Olaf is, it's not clear if he's a dog, but he's part of the same litter. Sadly, he shows up when the kids get wind of this ugly dog competition, and Snoopy is encouraged to invite his brother Olaf to come out for a visit, and he, of course, gets first prize.
Yeah, that's a good question. Are they all the same litter?
As far as I know,
I don't know.
But yeah. So again, Schultz had Snoopy in the hospital for an operation, and his brothers, Andy, Spike, and Olaf, turned out to visit him.
No, that's a good question. 94. So when was Sparky in the hospital for us?
Early 80s.
Is that in the 80s?
Yeah. So this would be.
Oh, this is but this particular strip is 94. This is I think this is Andy's first appearance in the strip, and Andy was a wire-haired terrier that Schultz had.
Right.
So he,
right.
Based the dog's appearance on like what would a wire-haired terrier version of a beagle look like.
And what's strange is that if you work at the Schultz Museum, you hear a lot about Andy because he was truly adorable and he had a big personality, and the Schultzes were very fond of him. And in that strange way that some pets become legends, you heard the Andy stories. And we were putting together an exhibit about dogs. And I asked Jeannie just to be sure. He didn't have any other dogs at the same time as Andy, right? And Andy was his last dog. And she was like, well, actually, no, there was another one the whole time. And I forget the other one's name. He had a human name. He was around before Andy. He was around after Andy. There are no photos of him. He is never mentioned in the lore. He just wasn't as funny.
Do you know what type of dog?
He was a collie of some kind.
Uh-huh.
I want to say a border collie. Yeah, and so, yeah, what can you do? Must have been bemused by the whole Andy thing.
So there's 4 of Snoopy and 3 of his brothers. So out of the 8, only 2 others were introduced in the strip. This is Snoopy's sister, Belle, and that's her son. So Snoopy, Snoopy went off to it was Kansas City.
Yes.
To see his sister, and this was, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was one of the trips where he was trying to get to Wimbledon, but didn't quite get outside of the United States and ended up on some misadventure. So he met his beloved sister Belle, and again his not so beloved nephew, who doesn't even get a name. And it's noted in the strip that he has a certain resemblance to the Pink Panther. So this strange, and I thought this was fun. This kind of gave Schultz an opportunity to draw weird off-model versions of Snoopy by introducing his extended family. And one more. This is Snoopy's brother, Marbles. And Marbles was only around for exactly one storyline. Visited Snoopy, who was in his World War I flying ace mode, and Marbles was kind of this character who he did not buy into Snoopy's reality at all, and I think ultimately it just didn't work with the strip to have somebody show up and question this. It works for one storyline. It's funny for that, but beyond that, you don't want to. Looking at the doghouse, you don't want to shoot holes in your whole premise in Snoopy's fantasy reality.
Well, it's a good point. If you study the strip, there's only a few characters who can understand what Snoopy is actually thinking. Those are thoughtful ones. They're not talking. But if I know, if it's like Marbles, Woodstock, and Charlie Brown, that's about it, right?
Mm-hmm. And not even in a conversational tone. Charlie Brown knows what Snoopy wants.
Right.
He knows him as a dog.
Well, they
his
did
owner knows his dog.
In the animated series, they would do that because Snoopy never thinks or talks in the animated series. Charlie Brown would interpret what Snoopy's thinking.
And it was animator Bill Melendez who did Snoopy's voice whenever he had to do a wah or a some kind of a vocal expression. All right. Any guesses on this character?
It looks like Marcy without glasses.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Lydia. So again, very few characters in Peanuts get to have a happy love life, and so this is another character who crossed paths with Linus, and they met out on the playground at lunchtime, and Lydia asks when he was born. He says he was born in October. She mentions I was born in December, and then there's a dramatic pause. Aren't you kind of old for me? And funny thing about this is, according to Charles Schultz, this was actually said to him by a girl that he'd asked about, and It's one of the things I found is true with cartoonists, and maybe you can verify this, but you never forget a good insult, especially if it's directed at you.
But it can all go back to the redheaded girl. He wrote about the redheaded girl who really existed. It really was a redheaded girl. And what was her name?
Donna Johnson. She married a Mr. Wold instead of Schultz.
Yeah, and so he was heartbroken over that, but he never forgot it. So that's how. And, I was a little disappointed when we finally saw what she looks like, because I always wanted to be that image that.
So the first time was in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Although we did see a silhouette, I think, at some point, didn't we?
Just a silhouette in the strip, so we never did see her face.
But it was always nice to have that mystery, because it couldn't really match up to what she thought she really looked like.
Yeah, and sometimes you have no choice but to become the most famous and celebrated cartoonist of all time to get over these slights.
It's the best revenge they've
seen. Okay, and every once in a while you'd see a character in Peanuts who looked almost like she didn't belong to that same universe. And this, again, part of Linus's checkered past. This is Truffles. And she got that name from her grandfather, who said that she was, as rare and precious as a truffle. And Linus and Snoopy met her one day when Snoopy got it into his head that he was going to find some truffles.
What year is this from?
This is, I think this is early 70s.
And they still got peanuts in the corners.
Yeah. Linus and Snoopy got it in their head that they were going to find truffles, and they went off on this whole expedition, and they found a girl named Truffles.
Yeah.
And this led to eventually their second meeting on a school field trip. Sally, who again had unrequited love for Linus,
Sweet baboon.
yeah, did not get along with Truffles. That was there's animosity from their first meeting. So Linus, to get away from them, climbed up to the top of a barn in snowy weather and found himself stuck up there, which obviously can only be resolved by Snoopy as a helicopter and Woodstock as the pilot rescuing Linus. And just to get a little topical, they asked where Woodstock learned how to fly a helicopter. Does anybody know? Okay, Vietnam.
Oh.
So, Peanuts did not exist in a vacuum. There were frequent pop culture references. So whatever was new and cool and what the kids liked at the time. So you saw hula hoops and transistor radios and TV antennas and if you kept going, then I'm sure we would have had some iPhone jokes and all the rest. But I'll mention that the Peanuts licensing department actually frowns upon that. So any technology that wasn't introduced by the end of the strip, they don't want that to show up on official Peanuts merchandise. You don't get, phones have cords, TVs are not flat screens.
Yeah, maybe you can answer this. I'm seeing new marketing stuff with Peanuts characters on it, but it doesn't look like they're sanctioned because it looks like there's modern stuff in it.
Yeah, it's, I'm not an expert on this and can't speak to it except from what people at the studio have mentioned. Like, I know they feel authorized to bend the rules a little bit more if it's going to Japan, or if it's otherwise like outside of the country, I think. But I mean, stuff that's here, I don't really know. You'd really have to talk to Lex Fajardo or any of the other official arbiters of what's Peanuts and what isn't. It's always been very fascinating to me where they draw those lines. that, for example, you can only show Farron the cat with Snoopy. Like, that's just the rule. And I'm not sure exactly why, because Farron is Farron in the presentation?
I don't remember. We'll see.
Okay, well, we'll have an adventure
Yeah, I don't
and
think
find
so,
out if
no.
Farron's there. But
Yeah.
A one-off character who Schultz did not think was funny, a cat that just drapes and has no bones. Like, fast forward 60 years, Farron is huge in Japan, just iconic, and completely forgotten in the U.S. So it's
It's funny how things catch on in Japan.
yeah.
You know, things that are not as big here.
And they've got a whole Snoopy museum over there, and the Snoopy hotel, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Justin was just there. Justin works up at the studio, and he
Justin
Thompson, yeah, and he and I are buddies on Facebook. So, and he's in Japan right now, and he showed a picture of the hotel. I didn't know there was a Snoopy hotel.
Yeah, each room is a different theme. So yeah, I'd love to go. I had to really rack my brain for a moment to figure out who this was, but I got it now.
Yeah, so I mentioned the friendships of Charlie Brown. So Linus gradually settled into the best friend role, and there's some, I could fill a whole extra panel on the way aging worked in the Peanuts comic strip, where Linus was introduced as a baby and then gradually caught up practically caught up to Charlie Brown, where they were sometimes seen in the same classroom, whereas Lucy was, always, I don't know, maybe a few minutes older than Charlie Brown. It was hard to pin down the ages.
Schroeder started up that way. Schroeder started up the baby.
Yeah, a baby who eventually became as old as Charlie
Yeah.
Brown, and even sometimes took a mentor role to him. But anyway, this is one of Charlie Brown's friends from camp, and Charlie Brown went to summer camp practically every year, and struck up a friendship with another homesick kid, Roy, and Charlie Brown was thrilled to find somebody else who felt like a fish out of water, and he and Roy hit it off right away. And they didn't spend all that much time together outside of the camp setting. Roy promised to look him up when they got back to the real world. And Schultz incidentally hated going to summer camp every year, but he had to do it. But he had this just feeling of resignation, and
You mean when he was a kid, or
when he was a kid, he just didn't want to go off to summer camp every year, but his parents made him do it. But Roy ended up being very important, not so much for his role in Charlie Brown's life and what he brought to the neighborhood, but one of Roy's friends was a girl named Peppermint Patty. So that in a way, that was Roy's whole function in the strip, was he was there as a conduit to bring Peppermint Patty into Charlie Brown's life. And Schultz said, "Wait, I really got something with this character. Let's make her one of the main characters." And then Roy kind of just faded off into the background.
Well, with Peppermint Patty also, you saw Patty fade off into the background, because Patty was one of the original characters. And I met Patty. Patty was Sparky's cousin. And I met her at they had a gold medal ceremony for Sparky at the Capitol in D.C., Congressional Gold Medal. So we were invited, so my father and I went. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting next to Patty. And so she introduces herself, and she wouldn't stop talking, which was great. She was telling me things about what Sparky was like when he was a kid, and he was Sparky's mom's sister's daughter. That's how it was. So And she was a school teacher, so I'm a teacher, and so we bonded. So, but that's who Patty was named after.
And if you Google her, Patty Swanson or Patricia Swanson, she's a dead ringer. Like, it's a very explicit homage. Like, especially when she was younger, she had the side bang, like sort of that tomboyish shirt. So.
And not to make it a commercial for my book, but I have a lot of quotes from Schultz in there, and he talks about the name Peppermint Patty. And when he hit upon that, he said, "Someone else is going to think of this if I don't rush out and put her into the strip. Someone else is going to take it." And so that's.
But he said, the name. He thought the name, but he thought the strip was kind of boy heavy at that time, so he wanted to bring in a new type of female character. That's Peppermint Patty.
Great. And he got to address all kinds of social issues. He got to talk about women in sports and feminism, and Title IX, and other issues that were of concern to him. He got to, just like Walt Kelly and Pogo, he got to sneak in heavy issues from the news and slip them into, on the surface, a kid's comic strip. These characters a little faster. This is Maynard. Maynard was Peppermint Patty's tutor, Marcy's cousin, and had no bedside manner. Shows up because Peppermint Patty is once again having trouble in school, in part because her dad is raising her by himself. We find out bits and pieces of Peppermint Patty's home life. She stays up late because her dad is out working late, and as a result, she is always exhausted in school, falling asleep all the time, and this has an impact on her studies. And Maynard has no sympathy for her plight, asking if she's the dumb one when he goes to visit. This is Naomi, and she does not intersect with the main Peanuts cast, but rather takes care of Spike after
That's right.
he gets injured out in the desert. Spike is wearing the shoes that he insists were gifted to him by Mickey Mouse. Spike lived in Needles, California. His best friend is a cactus. And he's got a very tragic origin story that doesn't get revealed until the 1990s.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I know the story. Spike's just a lonely guy. He's just lonely. And was it Sparky or somebody said Spike represents Sparky when he's in a bad mood, and the cactus is his drawing board.
That's very good.
Yeah. And Spike is just destined to be alone because Naomi and her mother offer to take Spike in, but he's just too untamable at this point. He insists on going off to live in the desert by himself.
Was there a reason they picked Needles?
Oh, he lived there as a child briefly.
Okay.
His family had this ill-conceived experiment of moving to California. And his dad packed up the barber shop and cut hair and needles for a while, and scrammed back to Minneapolis.
Okay, another weird, barely looks like a Peanuts character. This is Loretta, and my theory is that one Girl Scout too many knocked on Charlotte Schultz's door. Because she shows up exactly twice. Once when Snoopy is lost and worried he's going to die after a camping trip goes awry, and the first sign of civilization he sees obviously is a Girl Scout selling cookies. So Snoopy's rescued by Loretta, and Schultz brings her back later on. Charlie Brown gets invited to a party, and he's confused because he doesn't know who's invited him or why, and he's excited because he's going to meet this girl who called him and specifically invited him and wanted to see him, And of course, he answers the door, and it's Loretta who wants to sell him some Girl Scout cookies. So, yeah, Charlie Brown has the right expression there. Okay, and some more. We'll go through these characters pretty quickly. This is Larry. And Larry was part of, inexplicably, Sally was asked to teach a Sunday school class. I don't know why. I don't know why you would pick someone who's so disinterested in school, and you know, I wouldn't think she'd be any more interested in Sunday school. But she was asked to teach a class to the younger kids, and she runs afoul of the minister's son, Larry, who can't stop talking about The Great Gatsby, even no matter what biblical discussion comes up, he just wants to talk about The Great Gatsby, and that was one of Charles Schultz's favorites, if not his favorite book. So you get lots of Great Gatsby references over the course of the strip's history. This guy is one of my favorites. This is one of the characters who showed up when I first started reading Peanuts in the newspaper, Harold Angel. I mentioned Sally not being the best student or necessarily the brightest kid. She's in a school play at Christmas time and insists that there's a moment in the school play where she says "hark" and then Harold Angel sings. And Linus and Charlie Brown obviously say, well, this is Sally, so she must be mixed up. She must be confusing. She must have the song lyrics mixed up with something. We don't know what it is, but then there's a knock on the door right before Christmas, and it's Harold Angel. So this, I think, was Christmas '83. And I very clearly remember reading this in my hometown paper. And yeah, holidays, Christmas was a big part of the strip every year. You got a lot of, again, you're filling 365 days a year with the comic strips and coming up with these recurring gags. So what are some of your favorite recurring things in Peanuts?
Well, the biggest would be kicking the football. You know, because Charlie Brown never really kicked the football. You know, Lucy would convince him, "I'll hold it this time," and he never did. And he said it, and really, it's part of it. He never would, because I think this relates to a talk we had about Little Abner once, and he said, you know, when Al Cap married off Little Abner, that really took away the main theme of the strip. Because the main strip theme was Daisy Mae is trying to marry Little Abner. And then they got married, and he said after that the strip went down. And Sparky always said that there's no funny in success. You know, failure is funny. And if Charlie Brown ever kicked that ball, well, he could never go back again to Lucy taking the ball away. So I'd say my recurring theme would be kicking the football.
Any holidays or just recurring?
I mean, he always kept it thematic when it came to the holiday season. So there's always a Thanksgiving, there's always a Christmas. So he had to fill in the spaces in between, I guess. I don't know, did he have a list of ideas that he could, like always themes that he could bring back?
Well, I know on his calendars, like he would keep close track of the holidays, and when it was, because he always kept two calendars, one for his appointments and one for the strip, where he would mostly just track what punchline he had just written and when it would run. I know he was very methodical about holiday tracking because, you know, that was the backbone of his year on which you could build everything else. I feel like I haven't really answered the question, but yeah, it's now I'm trying to think about my favorite recurring gag, and all I can think of is "Stop Calling Me Sir," which I know I've read at least one article from an irate fan specifically complaining about "Stop Calling Me Sir," like saying that was not funny the first time, that was never funny. But I think it's well observed because you rarely get to see between between women. It's a Bechdel pass, that joke, and that the two of them have what I interpret to be like sort of this dry recurring joke between them. Like, it's not that Marcy is still confused about Patty's gender. It's just that they have this thing where they just do this bit because they care deeply for each other. And I think that it's an example of Schultz, even in a story that has very little continuity, still having characters whose relationships evolve, and we sort of see their strange closeness put to the test in many ways over the years.
Was that question, you always ask, does Marcy do it because she wants to be polite, or she does it because she knows it bugs Peppermint Patty?
I mean, a little of both.
Yeah.
It's loving and it's mocking.
Okay, so we're going to get into our wrap up here. I'll mention, you mentioned Bill Malden earlier, so after, Veterans Day was a recurring, you could always count on a Willie and Joe or Bill Malden quaffing a few root beers at Bill Malden's house. Gags on November 11th. All right, Peggy Jean. Charlie Brown had, for a few summers anyway, had a girlfriend at camp. He got confused and flustered when he introduced himself, so she was under the impression his name was Brownie Charles. But that ended tragically. He went back to camp one year, really looking forward to meeting her, and found out she had a boyfriend. So he had to call home and talk to Snoopy to hear her friendly voice. So again, like, he had that. He never wins for very long. I don't know that anybody does in Peanuts. But yeah, we'll
I was literally about to bring up the story of Emily.
Yeah.
Charlie Brown's fully requited dancing partner crush who, I mean, spoiler, it's going to happen in 30 seconds. She doesn't exist. Like, she's just an elaborate fantasy.
Yeah. So she may or may not be real. Like, he leaves a little wiggle room there, so you don't really know. But yeah, again, you get another Great Gatsby reference in this strip. Okay, but yeah, we want to go out on a good note. This is Charlie Brown actually getting to be a hero, running afoul of Joe Agate. So he's this big kid who comes along and beats everybody at marbles. Plays for keeps, which is really not a nice thing to do. Takes rerun for all his marbles. So Charlie Brown is a respected older authority figure. Rerun tells him about this, and Charlie Brown comes in and says, "Well, all right, we're going to play for keeps." And blink, 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 blink. Charlie Brown takes him down in the style of an old Western hero, and gets to save the day. So I think we'll go out on a high note. And thanks everybody for coming. We'll be hanging around for a little while to answer questions. If you have any follow-up questions about Peanuts, I'm happy to sign copies of the book. And
Does Charlie Brown ever get to kick the ball?
No.
There's
Well-
one. Well, I
There's
the one with rerun. There's one time that we don't know how it comes out because Lucy's called away from the football due to some kind of emergency. I don't know, Lucy problem, and she leaves rerun to handle it, and he refuses to tell her whether he pulled it away or not. He just said, "You'll never know."
Right.
So, but never on screen.
But they at Sparky's Memorial up in Santa Rosa, they at the end of the memorial, they actually ran voice of Sparky saying, he never got to kick that ball. So.
but let's see. Actually, let me
Do you have a kick?
let me backtrack. Since we don't have a kick, we're gonna have him. Here we go. There we go. So to send you off with something happy, this is him hitting a home run in the ninth inning. 1993, he saved the day. He hit the home run ball. Again, dealing with the question of what's real and what's not in the Peanuts world. The home run pitch came off of Roy Ann Hobbs. You might recognize that name as derivative of Roy Hobbs,
Right.
the protagonist of The Natural.
Yeah.
And she claims that she's, as the granddaughter of Roy Hobbs, that this has ruined her life. That someone hit a home run, a game-winning home run off of her.
Well, it's even more devastating when someone tells her he was a fictional character.
Yes. So
Yeah.
no one knows for sure. Charlie Brown may have hit a home run, his game-winning home run, off a fictional character who also says that she kind of liked him and may have deliberately given him an easy pitch.
You know, you mentioned
So again, no clean cut victories in Peanuts.
You mentioned Rerun, and does everybody know who Rerun is? Because I talked to my students, and there's a group that, because Rerun wasn't in the early specials. Rerun is Linus and Lucy's little brother, and it looks dead off like Linus. That's how he got the name Rerun, because he's a rerun of Linus. But I find when I talk to people about Peanuts, not everybody knows who Rerun is.
Because he looks like Linus, and if he's not identified by name.
Well,
They
the thing
think it's Linus.
And of course, Rerun's a cartoonist. That's the thing. He explicitly identifies as an underground cartoonist, and so, you know, I've seen him adopted as a little bit of a mascot by folks of the cartoony ilk. He also has an undercut. I mean, he's very contemporary. I have a soft spot for Rerun.
Was there any thought by Schultz of maybe drawing some cartoons in advance that would be maybe used posthumously for like tying together all these, letting Charlie Brown kick the football, you know, or letting him meet the little red-haired girl, or
Not that I know.
Who
of.
was it? I know I've read and I forget who it was. I know that people encouraged him to do that, but he didn't like the idea. He wanted it to end when he did, and
Right.
now you would know this better than me, I suppose.
He had gotten together with a family. There came a time for a new contract. And, you know, the syndicate, you know, they want to keep making money off of Peanuts. Do they run this strip? Does anybody else draw Peanuts? And he talked to his family about it, and they made the decision on it that we don't want anybody else to do the strip. Now, there may be like comic books, but there's comic books now, and people at the studio draw the comics. They take storylines that Sparky had done previously. But it came to a decision nobody else would draw the strip. So it still runs in newspapers, but those are all reruns.
There was actually, I don't remember when it was, but back in the old days, the syndicates used to own the strip, and they would essentially hire the artist to do the strip. And there was a contract negotiation coming up for his renewal for his strip with United Features, which was his syndicate. And as a bizarre strategy, the syndicate thought it would be a good idea to have somebody draw some Peanut strips to show him that he wasn't as integral to the strip as he thought he would be. So that he might, you know this?
No, I don't know this. This is
So they
amazing.
had Al Plastino, who used to draw Supergirl, and he was, and you can look them up online and see them, and they're actually, you wouldn't know that they weren't drawn by Schultz other than it says Plastino instead of Schultz. They were never used, and allegedly they were all destroyed, but they weren't. And I don't know if this had any influence on the negotiation, but what happened eventually was that Schultz did manage to gain ownership of the strip.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to see the strip drawn by somebody else.
Yeah, and some cartoonists would, some of the successful ones would use assistants, and they would, kind of a mentorship program. There's the understanding, if I die, you get to carry on the strip, and you can continue it. And some cartoonists' children carry on the strip after they pass away or retire.
Bud Sagador to Popeye.
So sometimes you have this nice continuity from,
Family circus is still going on.
Or BC, maybe Mastriani.
from one artist to the next. And,
Yeah.
But some artists, depending on their contract or depending on their deal with their
Line.
syndicate, the strip Crazy Cat was never continued after George Harriman died because, in part, they didn't think, and I think they were right, that anyone else could capture what he brought to the strip or do it.
But also, everybody hated Crazy Cat. It was only hated because Hearst liked it. He insisted his name was carried.
Yeah.
That too.
There's
Say
that
Hearst never
thought,
gave us
you know, if you're creative enough to continue somebody's strip, then you should be able to create enough to create your own strip. You know? It's not, it's asking, you know, somebody to duplicate, you know, Louis Armstrong or something like that, you know. It's you. So,
I would never do someone else's strip. Never.
well, if they pay you enough.
I'm joking.
Well, you are.
Yeah, I
Oh.
So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and we'll have you back after Alley has been running for a for a Toon talk. We'll be happy
How
to do that.
old is Ellie?
Started in 1932.
Yeah,
That's 85 years old.
that's great.
But yeah, let's thank our panelists.
Thank you.